Hello. Big summer blowout. Hello. Hello, hello. Welcome back. What is your mental health routine? This is a very, very broad question because I feel like my mental health routine isn't ingrained in like every single part of my day, in my entire being. I think a more specific question that I can answer is, for example, like how I get my mind ready in the morning. Something very important to me is music in the morning. I love playing either gospel music or affirming music in the morning. Not just good music, but specifically affirming music. I love Tony Jones, Cleo Soul, Lizzo. I still listen to Lizzo because, Lizzo, Janae Aiko, Jamila Woods. Things where inside of the music are affirmations about myself or my beliefs to start my day are extremely important because those are the first thoughts of your day and they help you get out of bed. Making my bed, because I have the time in the morning, I like to get out of bed, make myself tea, get back in bed, and I like to read a little bit before getting out of the bed. It wakes me up, it gives me ease to my morning, and I feel a little smarter because of it. In high school, whenever the pandemic was going on, I was really, really focused on self-discipline. And I was one of those people that would wake up at 5 a.m. just to get more done and be like productive. Like I was a productive whore. Okay. I was a productivity whore. All right. And I was so for years. And this is for another episode, but I had really bad workaholic tendencies about a year and a half ago that like impacted my physical health and my mental health and just a lot of things in my life. And a lot of that came from how I started my morning. And I found that whenever I woke up in the morning, I would have so many thoughts making me feel like if I didn't get up immediately, I was doing something wrong. If I had a slow, relaxed morning, I was not being responsible. And that kind of thing made me not want to get out of bed. It made me depressed in the morning. So obviously, I had to change that. Going slow in the morning is so important to me, even if I have to wake up a little earlier sometimes to do that. I journal in the morning. I do Bible study in the morning. I make sure to eat a good breakfast. All of these things creating intention throughout my day. And as you can probably tell, words of affirmation are a huge love language for me. So books, words in songs, journaling are how I start my day. It's how I configure my brain to be like, this, no matter how this day goes, this is the foundation of the day. You know what I'm saying? Hello, everybody. Welcome to Goodnight, Girl, the podcast where we can just take a minute from this week, because this week was hard. Today was hard. And we don't have to worry about anything that happened today. Right here, we can reflect. We can wind down before we go to sleep. Okay? Before we start, let's take a deep breath. Breathe in and out. Wonderful. Let's do it one more time. Breathe in and out. It's so very important, no matter how much of a challenging day that you've had, to give yourself space to just put it all down for a second. And even if that results in some tears, even if that results in you realizing how busy your mind is, it's important to check in and see where you're at. And I hope that was that for you today. Today, I asked you guys on Instagram what questions you had about caring for your mental health. And we gonna get into it. How do I interact with politics without having a mental breakdown? I've got an answer for you. This year was frustrating. And I have had my fair share of mental breakdowns because of politics. If you have been following me, you know a big portion of my content is around Black history, education, social issues, things like that. So a lot of my feed, a lot of the people that I talk to, were talking about politics. And at first, I felt really, really guilty about wanting to put it down for a second. I felt incredibly, incredibly ashamed of getting tired of talking about it because You know, the things that are happening in our world are extremely real. They're extremely serious and daunting, and it feels very urgent and all at once. And like sometimes it can feel like the end of the world. And it's really, really difficult to balance caring about the world and our state of being while also caring about your mental health. It kind of feels like sometimes they're in contradiction to each other. Do you know what I'm saying? And the way that I can answer this question is only from my experience. For me, most of my political anxieties would come from the internet. And it got to a point, I think, especially this year, where I realized that a lot of the things that I was ingesting about politics came from social media posts that were giving facts and they were giving news, but they were doing so in a very exploitative way, so that it would be like I'm watching a video that is really making me laugh, and then the next post, all of a sudden, my mood tanks. And then it rises up again, and then it tanks again the next post that comes up. It's not necessarily getting politics and news from the internet, but it's that back and forth of scrolling online where you're really, really happy, and the next post, you're thinking about the end of the world. And it's a cycle. And that can do some crazy things to your psyche. So for me, I've had to unfollow a lot of accounts. I did not want to unfollow a lot of political accounts, but I needed to make a boundary between what I ingest at certain times. So for me now, I get a lot of politics when it's an intentional time for me to get it. I get a lot of my education now from reading. A more regulated way for me to learn about the news and politics is through reading. Not just reading a one-off social media post where the political creator is doing things to make it go viral, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because on social media, to get information out, you have to make it have virality. So it has to be exploitative in some ways. But because of that, there is shock value that comes from that, and it impacts your mental health. I've used shock value to get social issues to go viral because I want people to know about those social issues, but I'm also combating an algorithm. You can't get away from it. But if you want to continue to educate yourself in politics while maintaining your mental health outside of social media, sometimes you just got to get a book. Because this book, like, if you get a good history book, a good book about politics that's written well, it's going to keep you engaged. You're going to learn probably a lot more from it than you could a social media post. You can talk about it with other people a lot better. And you don't have to worry about feeling so much shock value all at once, all the time. Like every time you get on the internet, it's like Russian roulette. Do you know what I'm saying? You trying to create healthy boundaries online when it comes to politics does not have to be a guilt-ridden thing. You just have to switch where it's coming from. That's a change that I've made, especially because I'm a creator. So politics, my professional work, my personal life, and my social life are all intertwined online. Obviously, I got to create some hard boundaries. And at the end of the day, you cannot do anything to help this world or understand this world in politics if you are deteriorating. If you need to step away for even just a moment, please do that. And if it's going to help you to come back to the situation with a clear mind, that's so much better. Be mindful of what is creating shock value in your life instead of education. And if those things are, change the source you're getting it from. Education from creators online can sometimes be very iffy. And I say that as an educational creator who has messed up some facts sometimes. So please be careful. I need to sneeze. Oh, girl, I need to sneeze. Oh, the sneeze went away. You know how the sneeze is coming up and then sneeze like, just teasing. And then it went away. That's what just happened. Having bad mental health is just being human, is it not? We all get sad, but we have to, you know? This is an interesting comment. And I think they're right. I think this perspective is valid. I think it is very valid because having struggles with emotions, mental health, and our spirit is what makes us human. What makes us human is the fact that we think, we rationalize, we ask why, we think about the past. There are so many animals that do not think about the past. Like, they don't understand that concept. But we think about the past, we think about the future, and that makes us human and extremely, extremely, extremely complex. And having mental health that makes thinking about those really, really complex ideas overwhelming is hard. It's really, really hard. And it does make us human, but I don't think that means that we don't have the ability to learn how to regulate those emotions and learn how to learn about ourselves and what we need through that. I think that having quote unquote bad mental health are just signs of getting to know ourselves and how we were born and the experiences that we went through and how those things have shaped us. I don't think it's a bad thing to recognize that maybe your mental state makes it a little harder to go through life than other people. But that doesn't mean that you can't take steps, whether it be through therapy, medication, or even natural ways or spiritual ways to help you get through life. I just read this book. Girl, this book was crazy as fuck. But like, it's called Cat's Cradle. And one thing I took away from it, there's a quote in there that's basically saying, like, I'm very much paraphrasing, but it's essentially telling man to do what you have to do that doesn't harm anyone else, that helps you get through life happily. And I feel like that is a very true statement when it comes to finding ways to cope with how our mental health is through life. It's not bad mental health. It's just the state your mind is in. That's it. And just like everybody's personality, everybody's thumbprint, it's going to be different for everyone. And it is our pleasure as humans to learn about that and understand that and discover the ways, the tools, the words, the people in our life that helps us cope with it and helps us move through it with grace. That's what I think. That's how I interpret that comment. But thank you for that comment. How do you responsibly step away from draining relationships? I wish I could tell you personal stories from this, but these people are still in my life and I love them very, very much. So I'm not going to go into it too much. But I will say that communication is the key here. It's the key, even when it is awkward and hurtful and painful. Communication is the responsible thing to do. If you're in a situation where somebody's asking too much of you, or they're requiring too much of you, or maybe somebody else is not giving enough for you, you need more from them. And you want to step away, but you don't necessarily want to have beef with them or something like that. At the end of the day, you have to be communicative about that. And you have to say it flat out. You cannot beat around the bush. I have made mistakes in friendships. I've made mistakes in romantic connections where I thought the best thing was to slowly step away without really like saying anything. And I think that's fine in connections where maybe you're just acquaintances, or maybe you don't have like very strong roots or like emotional depth to these people. But in relationships and connections where you have history with a person or you have an established relationship with them, doing that, slowly distancing yourself away, just makes you look bad. It makes them feel anxious. And it doesn't create healthy room to grow. It just creates strife and unneeded beef. It's so much better to say with your words very hard truths in a very honest but compassionate way, even if the person gets mad or even if the person doesn't agree, than for you to just ignore the problem completely, because that just makes you look bad. If you're in a situation where you think there's something the person could change and it could be mended, then it's up to you to, if you need to, write down what you want to say to them if you're having trouble, and reading that out loud to a friend separate from that person, getting their feedback to see if it's maybe a little too harsh or maybe you could change something here and there while still keeping it truthful, and then go to them, say, hey, I need to talk to you, and have that courage to set your boundaries. and to be honest about what you need. And this is going to take patience. It's going to take a lot of hard work and practice from you. Something that I can say about myself that I have not been able to say in all of the previous years of my life is that I'm not afraid of conflict now. And that came from almost having lost 2 friends. It came from going through difficult situations with my family, and also going through incredible amounts of self-growth and change within myself. And something that I have so clearly learned now is that your fear of conflict will never, ever protect you from the pain of losing somebody in a terrible way. Or it will never, ever protect you from the shame and the guilt of hurting somebody. So my advice to you is take a second to really reflect in yourself what you need, whether that be from the other person or what you need from yourself. And if that means that you have to distance yourself from that person, then you need to tell them straight up. And you need to tell them sooner rather than later. Don't let your resentment grow, because that will just make them feel terrible. Just terrible. And if you need a support system, go to other friends and be honest. But do not do it so much to where that other person is hearing it from other people instead of you. Be an adult. Be a big girl. But most of all, be kind. And be honest about your emotions. There's something I have hanging up on my vision board that is literally a list from Pinterest. I'll put it like right here. It's literally a list on Pinterest that says how to set boundaries, or like what it means to set boundaries. And it's basically all of these affirmations saying things like, it's not my job to anticipate other people's emotions. I have the right to my own feelings. It's okay if others get mad. If you're doing all of these things with compassion and honesty, then that is how you step away from a draining relationship. Be honest. And please use I feel statements. Don't use you do this, you do that, and all this. Be compassionate and be honest about what you've been experiencing. If somebody is, for example, I don't know, maybe it's a toxic friendship where the person is jealous of you or something. It's important to be like, I feel like I don't receive enough support from you. And I feel that whenever I share these goals with you, I don't feel like they're being received in an exciting way. And it makes me feel insecure. And it makes me feel like I can't trust you. It makes me feel like this. So at this moment in my life, I need to take a step back from you. And it's going to be awkward as hell. It's not going to be like a movie. It's not going to be dramatic. It's going to be really uncomfortable. And you're probably going to sit in silence, not knowing what to say. And you're probably going to have to make an awkward ass exit and be like, okay, well, I'm going to go now. And it's going to be awkward. But I'm going to tell you what, that is so much better than being uncommunicative. Every single time somebody has, like a friendship or a situationship or something, has ghosted me or just like not responded when I'm clearly like asking a question or doing something like that, I've always thought to myself, dang, like you didn't even have the courage to tell me this. And I'm sure on that side, I've heard from other friends and things like that where like avoiding conflict is fear of like hurting the other person or fear of making the other person mad or not wanting their reaction, right? To that response, girl, you got to do what you got to do for you. And it does not matter how that other person reacts. If you care about that person or if you know that you need to do the right thing, believe they're a big girl, believe they're a grown person, or that they are a capable human being, and tell them straight up. Be upfront for what keeps you safe. Because once again, this is your life. Do not waste it being in a situation that interrupts your peace. Don't do that. Do not do that. And listen, taking yourself away from a draining situation does not mean that it doesn't come back. And it doesn't mean that it's gone forever. It may be different, but it doesn't have to be gone. Or maybe it does leave. That just makes room for something that is nourishing. So that's my advice. How do you care for your mental health in late stage capitalism where care is expensive? That's a good ass question, okay? Now, all right, I gotta be honest with y'all. I'm financially stable, and that is something that I'm incredibly grateful and really blessed to say. I'm 21 and I am financially stable. That's not something a lot of 21-year-olds can say. I need to say that to you because you need to know what perspective it's coming from. And if you don't want to hear my perspective on that because of where I am, I completely understand. And I can only give you what I've experienced. Do you know what I'm saying? When I hear care is expensive. And it's not just in the sense of, skincare is overpriced, going to massages are overpriced, going to museums and outings is overpriced. Time is also expensive too. If you have a really over-demanding job, you might not have a lot of time to have that slow morning routine. If you are really trying to work on something and make something work, you may not have time to really feel like you have time to check in and go to therapy and all of these things. So care in every way now is damn expensive. Okay? Even your attention span is expensive because everybody online is trying to sell you a different way to take care of yourself. And it can be really, really draining trying to figure out which one is the best one among all of those other things going on. So that's very validating. It's very valid. To that, I will say, that's another thing. Healthcare is expensive too. But okay, regardless. Off my soapbox. There are mental health care practices that you can implement into your day-to-day that do not have to cost any money. And I'm not talking about the popular ones that are sold to you, like take a week off. Take a week off and go on a solo trip to Turkey. That's self-care. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is what I think I've mentioned it either in this episode or a different episode. After you get off from work, turn your phone off, turn the TV off, lock yourself in the bathroom for 2 minutes and sit in silence and check in with yourself. Can you afford 2 minutes? Can you afford 2 minutes? That is actually something I used to do in high school. I lived in a house with four other people, and sometimes I just needed a place to be alone, and I would literally go in my closet and close the door and sit on the floor in the dark, and I would just sit there for a second to just gather my thoughts. And that was kind of like my sanctuary. Not my sanctuary, that sounds crazy, but it would be just my moment of silence to be like, okay, let's just breathe for a second before I go back out. The smallest things that you can incorporate into your routine can change your day drastically. I used to do this thing in high school once again, where I would literally get a marker and I would write down an affirmation or a Bible verse or a compliment about myself or something encouraging on my wrist. So throughout the day, I could look at my wrist and remind myself. And that would change my mental health in a really, really crazy way. And it didn't cost me any money. Writing letters to yourself, doing video letters to yourself, encouraging yourself, things that you can look at in the future that remind you that you are here for you. I do video letters every 6 months where I check in with myself over what's happened in the past 6 months, what I'm struggling with now, and what I hope for myself. And those video letters have absolutely been one of the foundational factors in how I go about the rest of the year or the beginning of the year. I just watched one a couple days ago because it's December, and I could not believe the things that I spoke over myself that exist now in my mental health. Do you know what I mean? When you think of taking care of your mental health, if it doesn't have to do with needing medication and proper things that you need to buy, if it has to do with time or it has to do with just taking a break, there are ways that you can do that that aren't necessarily glamorous. Sitting in the closet in the dark on the floor for just 2 minutes to meditate a little bit, you ain't gonna see that on a self-care vlog on a YouTuber's channel. You're not gonna see that. But that is for me, that was very, very much mental health practice because it was taking a moment to ground. This life can be really rushed and crazy, and it is your right to find moments to ground. I think that's the best way I can answer that question. I really hope it helps. If you want me to be more specific, please let me know, and I can try my best. Those were all the questions, but I do want to share with you some books that really helped me understand my mind and how to come to my emotions and mental breakdowns with grace and with love. I feel like if you've been on the internet, you've probably seen this book, but The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, this book, he lays out a perspective about life that makes it so that you are visiting any kind of situation with love. That's what I like about this book. He talks about self-criticizing thoughts. He talks about conflict with other people. He talks about comparing yourself to other people. He talks about dealing with death. He talks about dealing with new things in your life. And it's just in a very clear way. I think a lot of times with like self-help books, in my opinion, from what I've read, I don't like whenever they try to be really, really overly complicated and really like, this is the key to life and this is everything we have to do. And when you really take a look at the complex value of things, like I don't like that because you don't sound like a real person. You sound like a corporate CEO. But this book is just very clear. Like it just says how it is. And I like that a lot. You know, it gets a little metaphor-y sometimes, but I don't mind that because I like poetic language. But this book really helped me during a hard time. So The 4 Agreements. Now, I'm gonna recommend you this book, but you're probably gonna cry. All About Love by Bell Hooks. This book takes you through many types of loves. Yes, romantic love. Yes, self-love. But also the ways in which we love and the ways in which we could love and the origins of how we're taught what love is right and what love is wrong. And it's a very challenging book to get through because probably within the first chapter, you're going to be like, ooh, I feel red. But it's really, really great. It's very introspective and taught me a lot about how to confront things from my past that shaped the values about romance that I have today. So All About Love, Bell Hooks. What else? Do I have another one up there? Let me go to my library real fast. I have a bookmark in it, but I did finish reading it through audiobook. Do Nothing. I was given this book for my birthday because like I said earlier, I had a very bad workaholic year and my friend was like, do nothing. But I read it and oh my goodness, it's wonderful because I really love the way that she laid out not just the state of how much we're taught that overworking is good in society, but she shares the history of how systems have been set up to make sure that we keep overworking. That in a lot of people's lives, it is not a choice. Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm saying? So she goes through the history of how that happened, not only in the systems it created, but also in the morals and values it created to make us believe that that's the right way to go. And she also in each chapter provides an alternative way of thinking and an alternative alternative practices that you can do to enjoy life alongside doing what you need to do in order to get the basic necessities of life. And on top of that, she shares her experience with the experiments she did on her own work life and what worked and what didn't work for her. So really wonderful book. It actually gave me the courage to not feel so much guilt over not wanting to work very hard. And even saying that phrase and not feeling like I'm being lazy or I'm too privileged to say that, you know, but recognizing that as humans, we are not made to work 24/7. And if you have the privilege to be able to not have to do that, you should not feel guilt. Do you know what I mean? I could talk about this book a lot. You see, I got like stuff in here. But yes, so those are my book recommendations for if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of your mental health. That's it for this episode. I really, really hope that if this week was hard for you, if this day was hard for you, please have an even more restful evening. Take a step away from social media. Oh, girl, do yourself a favor and turn your phone off and put it in a drawer for an hour. Just an hour. If you want music, girl, turn on a radio or something. Like, turn your phone off. Take a moment of silence and give yourself a little treat today. And go to bed early. Read, draw, do a non-online activity, and have a great rest of your week. Please take care of yourself. Check in with yourself. I'll see you next time. And also follow my Instagram if you want your question or piece of advice to be in the next video. And with that being said, good night, girl.